Single mom missed her bus to help an injured dog, only to meet her soulmate at the vet clinic. This was the thought that would later echo in Ellie Morgan's mind whenever she recalled the day that changed everything. Though in that rain-soaked moment, she only knew she was about to be very, very late for work. The sky wept over Seattle that Tuesday morning, the kind of relentless November downpour that seemed determined to wash away all traces of hope, along with the autumn leaves. Ellie stood at the bus stop, one hand clutching an umbrella that had long since surrendered to the wind, the other gripping her 7-year-old daughter Lily's small fingers. "Bus is coming in 2 minutes, Mom," Lily announced, her voice carrying that peculiar mix of childish excitement and adult responsibility that broke Ellie's heart a little each time she heard it. No second grader should have to worry about bus schedules. "Thanks, sweetheart." Ellie attempted to smooth her rain-frizzed hair with her palm, mentally calculating whether she'd have enough time to drop Lily at before-school care and still make it to the diner for her 7 a.m. shift. One more tardy, and Marge would have every excuse to cut her hours she desperately needed to make this month's rent. The familiar rumble of the approaching bus sent a surge of relief through her body. Just then, a pained yelp pierced the morning din, barely audible over the rain's persistent drumming against the pavement. Lily heard it too. "Mom, look." She pointed toward the bushes across the street where something small and dark was trying to drag itself along the sidewalk. The bus hissed to a stop before them, doors folding open with mechanical indifference. "Coming aboard?" The driver's impatient voice competed with another whimper from across the street. Ellie's eyes darted between the bus and the struggling shape. Time seemed to crystallize into a single, impossible choice. "Mom?" Lily tugged her hand, eyes wide with concern not for the impending lateness, but for the creature clearly in distress. "I'm sorry, we'll catch the next one," Ellie called to the driver, already pulling Lily toward the crosswalk as the bus doors closed with finality. The small dog, some kind of terrier mix, had collapsed by the time they reached it. Blood matted its dark fur, one leg bent at an unnatural angle. Its eyes, liquid brown and filled with a pain so pure it transcended species, locked onto Ellie's. "Oh no, poor puppy," Lily whispered, dropping to her knees despite the puddle soaking through her jeans. Ellie's chest tightened. The dog had no collar. Its ribs protruded beneath the wet fur. A stray, most likely, and now injured, probably hit by a car that hadn't bothered to stop. Like so many things in Ellie's life, this was a problem with no good solution. The next bus wouldn't come for 30 minutes. The closest vet clinic was 15 blocks away. Calling in late to work might cost her the job she could barely stand but desperately needed. The dog whimpered again, its breath coming in shallow pants. "We need to help him, Mom," Lily said, with the clear moral certainty that only children possess. Rain streamed down Ellie's face, mingling with tears she hadn't realized she'd shed. "I know, sweetheart." Decision made, she shrugged off her worn jacket, the only one she owned, and gently wrapped it around the trembling animal. "It's okay," she murmured, unsure if she was reassuring the dog, her daughter, or herself. "We've got you now." 45 minutes later, soaked to the bone and shivering, Ellie pushed open the door of Lakeside Veterinary Clinic with her shoulder, the dog cradled against her chest, Lily trailing behind with their dripping backpacks. "I need help," she announced to the empty waiting room, her voice cracking with cold and worry. "He was hit by a car, I think." A woman behind the reception desk jumped to her feet. "Oh my goodness," she gasped, rushing around to meet them. "Dr. Hayes," she called toward the back. "Emergency!" The door behind the desk swung open, and Ellie found herself looking into the warmest pair of hazel eyes she'd ever seen. The man they belonged to, tall, with dark hair slightly graying at the temples and lines at the corners of those remarkable eyes that spoke of both laughter and long nights, moved with calm efficiency. "What happened?" His voice was deep, steady, the kind that could talk someone off a ledge or soothe a frightened animal. "Found him by the bus stop," Ellie managed, suddenly aware of how she must look. Drenched, mascara probably raccoon-ringed around her eyes, late for work, and using her only jacket as a dog bed. "He can't move his back leg." "Doctor." Hayes gently took the bundle from her arms, his fingers brushing against hers. Despite the chaos of the moment, Ellie felt an unexpected warmth spread from that brief contact. "You did the right thing bringing him in," he said, already assessing the animal with gentle hands. "Sarah, prep room 2, please. And maybe get our heroes here some towels and hot chocolate?" Heroes. The word landed like an unexpected gift. When was the last time anyone had seen her actions as heroic rather than desperate or foolish? While Sarah, the receptionist, ushered them to a small break room and handed them towels, Ellie called the diner. As expected, Marge was unsympathetic. "Third time this month, Ellie. I got a business to run." "It was an emergency," Ellie explained, watching Lily wrap herself in a towel emblazoned with cartoon dogs. "I found an injured—" "Save it. Don't bother coming in today. I'll call you if I decide I need you tomorrow." The line went dead. Ellie stared at her phone, the familiar knot of panic tightening in her stomach. There went grocery money for the week. "Mom, will the doggy be okay?" Lily's voice pulled her back to the present. Ellie forced a smile. "Dr. Hayes seems to know what he's doing." An hour passed. Lily, having warmed up and finished her hot chocolate, was now happily drawing with colored pencils Sarah had produced from a desk drawer. Ellie sat beside her, fingers nervously tapping against her thigh, calculating and recalculating her budget, wondering if the local food bank would be open tomorrow. "Ms. Morgan?" She looked up to find Dr. Hayes standing in the doorway, his green scrubs now bearing dark patches of water and what might have been blood. Ellie stood quickly. "How is he?" "He's a fighter." The doctor's smile crinkled those lines around his eyes. "Fractured rear leg, some internal bruising, but nothing we can't fix. No microchip, though. Looks like he's been on his own for a while." "So he's a stray?" "Most likely. We'll get him patched up, then he'll probably go to the shelter once he's stable." Lily looked up from her drawing. "Can we visit him there?" The question hung in the air, loaded with implications Ellie wasn't ready to address. They couldn't afford a dog, could barely afford to feed themselves some weeks, and now possibly jobless. "Actually, Doctor," Hayes said, his eyes meeting Ellie's with unexpected intensity, "I was hoping you might fill out a found report. Sometimes owners are looking but haven't filed a missing report yet." He paused. "And I'd like to get your contact information. For the paperwork." "For the paperwork?" "Of course." Ellie nodded, ignoring the foolish flutter in her chest. As they followed him back to the reception area, Ellie noticed how he crouched down to Lily's level to show her the clipboard, explaining each form with genuine patience, not talking down to her or dismissing her questions. It had been so long since a man had treated either of them with such simple respect that Ellie found herself blinking back tears again. "I realize we never properly introduced ourselves," he said as Ellie completed the forms. "I'm Daniel Hayes, Ellie Morgan. And this is my daughter, Lily. I'm 7, Lily added helpfully. Daniel smiled. "A very important age. I have a nephew who's 7. He thinks he knows everything already." "That's silly," Lily giggled. "I only know some things." The easy banter between them twisted something in Ellie's chest. Lily's father had walked out before she was born, leaving a child-shaped hole in his life that he'd never attempted to fill. Lily had grown up without knowing what it was like to have a man smile at her that way, with genuine delight in her existence. "Can I ask what you've named our patient?" Daniel asked, turning back to Ellie. "Oh, we haven't, he's not—" "Lucky," Lily interrupted. "Because he's lucky we found him," Daniel nodded solemnly. "Lucky it is." "Excellent choice." As they prepared to leave, the rain having finally subsided, Ellie found herself reluctant to walk out the door. This warm space, with its smell of antiseptic and dog treats, had become a temporary haven from the harsh realities waiting outside. "Thank you," she said, meaning it for more than just the medical care. Daniel held her gaze a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you for stopping to help when most people would have just continued on their way." His voice softened. "The world needs more people like you, Ellie Morgan." The words followed her out into the gray afternoon, a small flame of warmth against the chill of uncertainty. 3 days passed in a blur of worry. Marge hadn't called her back to work. The rent was due in a week. And despite her best efforts to distract herself with job applications and budget spreadsheets, Ellie couldn't stop thinking about a certain veterinarian with kind eyes and the small dog they'd left in his care. "Can we go see Lucky today?" Lily asked on Friday morning over a breakfast of oatmeal that Ellie had stretched with extra water to make it last longer. Ellie sighed. They couldn't afford the bus fare for non-essential trips. "Honey, Doctor, Hayes is very busy and Lucky needs to rest and—" The phone rang, interrupting her explanation. Unknown number. "Hello? Ellie? It's Daniel Hayes from Lakeside Vet Clinic." Her heart performed an acrobatic maneuver in her chest. "Is everything okay with Lucky? He's recovering well." "Actually, that's why I'm calling. We've held him the required time and no owner has come forward." There was a pause. "Before we transfer him to the shelter, I wondered if you and Lily might want to come say goodbye." She seemed quite attached. The unspoken question hung between them. Would they want to adopt him? Impossible as it seemed, Ellie couldn't deny she'd thought about it. Having something else to love. Another heartbeat in their too-quiet apartment. We'd like that, she said, making the only decision she could. At least they could give Lucky a proper goodbye? Daniel's voice brightened. Great. I'm actually off this afternoon if that works for you. Office. Not working, just wanting to see them. The implication sent an unexpected thrill through her. We can be there around 2, she said, mentally calculating how to stretch her emergency bus fare. Perfect. I'll see you then. When they arrived at the clinic, the waiting room was busy with Friday afternoon appointments. Sarah waved them directly through to the back, where they found Daniel in a small recovery room, sitting on the floor beside a kennel, a notebook in hand. He looked up when they entered, his face transforming with a smile that made Ellie momentarily forget her worries. He wore jeans and a soft-looking flannel shirt instead of scrubs, and the casual look suited him even better. Right on time, he said, standing to greet them. Someone's been waiting for you. Inside the kennel, Lucky's ears perked up. His back leg was splinted, but his tail thumped against the padded floor with unmistakable joy. The transformation from the miserable, soaked creature they'd found was remarkable. His coat now revealed to be a rich brown with patches of black, his eyes bright and alert. Lucky! Lily dropped to her knees beside the kennel. Mom, look how much better he is! Daniel unlatched the door, and Lucky immediately tried to scramble out, whining with excitement. Careful with that leg, buddy, Daniel murmured, gently lifting the dog and settling him in Lily's eager arms. Lucky responded by washing her face with enthusiastic licks that sent her into peals of giggles. The sound of her daughter's laughter, real, uninhibited joy that had become far too rare, cracked something open inside Ellie. She crouched down beside them, running her hand over Lucky's now clean fur. He's doing incredibly well, Daniel said, his voice soft as he knelt beside her. About 15 pounds of pure determination. We estimate he's around 2 years old. He's perfect, Lily declared, looking up at Ellie with pleading eyes. Mom, please. Lily. Ellie cut her off gently. We talked about this. Daniel cleared his throat. Actually, I had a proposition to discuss with you. Ellie looked at him warily. The clinic runs a foster program for animals recovering from injuries, he explained. We provide the medical care, food, and supplies while the animal recovers in a home environment. After they're healed, they're either adopted or transferred to a partner shelter. He paused. I thought perhaps you might consider fostering Lucky during his recovery. It would be about 6 weeks. Ellie blinked, processing his words. You'd provide everything? Daniel nodded. Everything. And I'd make home visits to check on his progress. His eyes met hers. It would be helping us out, honestly. Our regular foster families are all full right now with kitten season. The way he presented it, as though she would be doing him a favor rather than the other way around, preserved her dignity in a way that made her throat tight with emotion. Please, Mom? Lily whispered, still cradling Lucky, who had settled contentedly in her lap. 6 weeks. 6 weeks with this small creature who had already brought more joy into their lives in 3 days than they'd experienced in months. 6 weeks of home visits from a man whose smile made her feel seen in ways she'd forgotten were possible. We'd love to foster him, Ellie said, the words bringing an immediate sense of rightness. Daniel's smile could have lit the darkest night. Fantastic. I was hoping you'd say that. An hour later, they left the clinic with Lucky, a bag of premium dog food, medications, toys, a bed, and a promise from Daniel to stop by their apartment on Sunday afternoon for the first checkup. You have my cell number now, he reminded Ellie at the door. Call anytime, day or night, if you have concerns. As they waited at the bus stop, the same one where they'd found Lucky, Ellie watched Lily gently stroking the dog in her lap, whispering promises of all the adventures they would have together. For the first time in longer than she could remember, the knot of anxiety in Ellie's chest had loosened. Yes, she was still jobless. Yes, the rent was still due. But somehow, those problems felt manageable in a way they hadn't before. The apartment felt different when they arrived home. Warmer, fuller. Lucky explored his new temporary home with cautious enthusiasm, his nails clicking on the worn linoleum of their small kitchen, his splinted leg not slowing him down as much as Ellie would have expected. That night, after tucking Lily and Lucky into bed together, despite her half-hearted protests that dogs belonged in dog beds, Ellie sat at her small kitchen table with a cup of tea and allowed herself to acknowledge the flutter of anticipation she felt about Sunday's visit. Daniel Hayes was just being kind, she reminded herself. Professional. He probably made all his foster families feel this way. Special, seen, worthwhile. Still, as she readied herself for bed, she found herself wondering what he might think of their apartment. It was small but clean, decorated with Lily's artwork and thrift store finds that Ellie had carefully selected to create a home rather than just a place to live. Would he see the love in those choices, or just the poverty they couldn't quite disguise? Sunday arrived with unexpected sunshine, as though the universe had decided to grant her wish for better lighting in their usually dim living room. Ellie spent the morning stress cleaning while Lily played with Lucky, who had already claimed the sunny spot by the window as his favorite place. At precisely 2 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Ellie smoothed her hands over her jeans, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, and opened the door. Daniel stood there, a stethoscope around his neck, looking even more handsome in daylight, holding a small paper bag from the bakery down the street. "I brought muffins," he said, a touch of uncertainty in his voice. "I should have asked if you have any allergies." The thoughtfulness of the gesture, bringing a gift, worrying about allergies, rendered Ellie momentarily speechless. "We don't," she finally managed. "That's very kind of you." Inside, Lucky greeted Daniel with enthusiastic recognition, nearly toppling over in his eagerness. "Someone's feeling better." Daniel laughed, setting down his medical bag to properly greet the dog. As he examined Lucky, Ellie was struck by the gentle efficiency of his movements, the same careful attention he'd shown at the clinic now on display in her living room. He involved Lily in the process, showing her how to check Lucky's gums for good color, explaining what he was listening for with the stethoscope. "You're doing an excellent job with his care," Daniel told them both, accepting the cup of coffee Ellie offered. "The foster program is lucky to have you." "We're the lucky ones," Ellie said softly, watching Lily demonstrate the sit command they'd been practicing with Lucky. They settled at the small kitchen table with coffee and muffins, and to Ellie's surprise, conversation flowed easily. Daniel asked about Lily's school, listened with genuine interest to stories about her art projects and science experiments. When the topic turned to Ellie's employment situation, she found herself admitting the truth. "I lost my job at the diner because I was late the day we found Lucky." Daniel's expression darkened. "That's completely unfair." She shrugged, attempting nonchalance. "It wasn't a great job anyway. I'm applying for others." He was quiet for a moment, then, "What kind of work would you like to do if you could choose anything?" The question caught her off guard. No one had asked her that in years. What did she want? The concept seemed almost foreign after so long of just taking whatever work she could get. "I used to want to be a teacher," she admitted. "Before Lily. I was halfway through my education degree when I got pregnant." "Why did you stop?" "Her father left. I needed full-time work immediately." She stirred her coffee. "Couldn't afford childcare and tuition." Daniel nodded, his expression thoughtful rather than pitying. "You know, my sister runs an after-school program at Lakeside Elementary. They're always looking for good people. The pay isn't amazing, but the hours would match Lily's school schedule." Hope, dangerous, fragile hope, fluttered in Ellie's chest. "I don't have a degree." "Experience raising a clearly wonderful child counts for a lot," he said, smiling toward Lily, who was reading a book to Lucky on the couch. "And Kate, my sister, believes in giving people chances. I could put in a word if you'd like." "Why would you do that?" The question escaped before Ellie could stop it, her instinctive wariness of help that came with strings attached rising to the surface. Daniel's eyes met hers, serious and sincere. "Because in my line of work I've learned to recognize a natural caregiver when I see one. The way you handled Lucky that first day told me everything I needed to know about your character." He paused. "And because everyone deserves a chance to pursue what they love." The warmth in his gaze made it difficult to breathe. "Thank you," she managed. "I'd appreciate the introduction." After Daniel left, promising to return the following weekend, Ellie found herself standing in the middle of her living room, overwhelmed by feelings she couldn't quite name. Lucky limped over and pressed against her leg, looking up at her with those soulful brown eyes. "This is just temporary," she told him, crouching to scratch behind his ears. "For both of you." But even as she said it, she knew something fundamental had shifted, like the first thaw after a long winter. The following week brought changes Ellie could never have anticipated. Daniel's sister Kate called on Monday, and by Wednesday, Ellie had interviewed and been offered a part-time position at the after-school program. The hours were perfect, the work environment warm and supportive, and for the first time in years, Ellie found herself doing work that felt meaningful. "The kids adore you," Kate told her at the end of her first week. "Daniel said you were a natural, and he was right." Daniel. His name appeared in her thoughts with increasing frequency. He texted every day to check on Lucky, sending her links to articles about dog training and rehabilitation exercises. Sometimes the conversation would drift to other topics. A funny story from his day, a question about how Lily was doing at school, a recommendation for a book he thought she might enjoy. His Sunday visits became the highlight of their week. He always brought something small: donuts, a bouquet of daisies, a children's book about veterinarians for Lily. Each visit lasted longer than the one before, stretching from the professional 45 minutes to hours of conversation that ranged from childhood memories to favorite movies to dreams they'd set aside. "I never wanted to be anything but a vet," he admitted during his third visit, as they sat on her small balcony watching Lily and Lucky play in the communal garden below. "Animals make sense to me. They don't judge or hold grudges. They live completely in the present. Unlike humans," Ellie said, thinking of all the ways her past mistakes continued to shape her present. "Some humans," Daniel corrected gently. "Others have an amazing capacity to start fresh." His eyes held hers. "To see possibilities instead of problems." By the fourth week of Lucky's foster period, the little dog was moving with barely a limp, his personality blossoming into a joyful, slightly mischievous companion who had firmly cemented his place in their hearts. Ellie had started saving a portion of each paycheck, telling herself it was for emergencies, but knowing deep down it was for the adoption fee she couldn't bear to think about yet. It was during Daniel's fifth visit that everything changed. He'd brought takeout for dinner, a luxury Ellie rarely allowed herself, and they'd lingered at the table long after the food was gone, talking as the apartment grew dark around them. Lily had fallen asleep on the couch with Lucky curled against her side. "I should probably get her to bed," Ellie said reluctantly, not wanting the evening to end. Daniel nodded, gathering the takeout containers. "I should let you get some rest." They moved around her small kitchen in comfortable synchronicity, cleaning up in a domestic rhythm that felt both foreign and strangely familiar. When their hands brushed as they both reached for the same container, neither pulled away immediately. "Ellie," Daniel said softly, her name almost a question in his mouth. She looked up at him, suddenly acutely aware of how close they were standing, of the gentle strength in his hands, of the way his eyes seemed to see straight through her carefully constructed defenses. "Lucky's recovery is nearly complete," he continued, his voice low. "Another week, maybe 2, and he'll be ready for adoption." The reminder was like a splash of cold water. 2 more weeks, and this temporary arrangement would end. Daniel's visits would stop. Lucky would go to a new home. The tentative happiness they'd built would crumble like a sandcastle at high tide. "I know," she whispered, turning away to hide the sudden sheen of tears in her eyes. "Ellie, look at me." His hand touched her shoulder gently, turning her back to face him. "I need to tell you something, and I'm not sure how." Her heart hammered against her ribs. Here it came. The catch, the disappointment, the reminder that good things weren't meant for people like her. "I've never done this before," he continued, running a hand through his hair in a gesture she'd come to recognize as nervousness. "Mixed professional and personal. But these past weeks getting to know you and Lily, watching how you care for Lucky, hearing about your dreams, seeing your strength," he took a deep breath. "I find myself looking forward to Sundays more than any other day. I find myself thinking about you when I should be focusing on work. I find myself wondering if you might feel even a fraction of what I'm feeling." The words hung between them, fragile and potent. "Daniel," she breathed, unable to form a coherent thought beyond the sound of his name. "I know the timing is complicated." He rushed on. "I know you have Lily to consider. I know I'm technically Lucky's veterinarian. But I also know that I haven't felt this way about anyone in a very long time, maybe ever, and I'd never forgive myself if I didn't at least tell you." Ellie stood frozen, overwhelmed by the naked vulnerability in his expression. How long had it been since someone had looked at her that way? Had anyone ever? "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "I'm a single mom with a mountain of student debt and no degree. I live paycheck to paycheck in a 1-bedroom apartment. I come with complications. I'm not looking for simple," he said, his smile gentle. "I'm looking for real." When his hand reached for hers, she didn't pull away. When his fingers intertwined with hers, she felt the connection like an electric current running through her body. "I'd like to take you to dinner," he said. "Just the 2 of us. A real date? No dog medicine or foster paperwork involved." A laugh bubbled up from somewhere deep inside her. "I'd like that too." The smile that spread across his face was like sunrise breaking over the horizon. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to her forehead, a gesture so tender, so careful of her boundaries, that it nearly undid her. "I should go," he murmured, "before I forget all my professional ethics completely." At the door, he turned back. "Oh, and Ellie?" "About Lucky." Her heart clenched. "Yes? I've been meaning to tell you. The clinic has a policy. Foster families get first option to adopt before we list animals publicly." Hope bloomed bright and dangerous. "We couldn't afford—" "The adoption fee is waived for foster families," he interrupted gently. "And as his doctor, I happen to know he's already found his perfect home." After he left, Ellie stood at the window watching him walk to his car, her fingertips pressed to the spot on her forehead where his lips had touched. Across the room, Lucky raised his head from his position beside Lily, his eyes meeting Ellie's with what seemed like understanding. "Looks like you might be staying," she whispered. The little dog's tail thumped twice against the couch cushions, as if to say he'd known all along what she was just beginning to believe, that sometimes missing your bus could lead you exactly where you needed to go. Their first official date was at a small Italian restaurant where the owner greeted Daniel by name and seated them at a corner table with a candle and a small vase of fresh flowers. Ellie wore a dress she'd found at the thrift store years ago and never had occasion to wear, and the appreciation in Daniel's eyes when he saw her made every moment of self-doubt during her preparation worthwhile. "You look beautiful," he said, the simple sincerity in his voice bringing warmth to her cheeks. Over pasta and wine, they talked without the constraints of professional boundaries or a 7-year-old's attentive ears. Daniel told her about growing up with 3 sisters, about veterinary school, about the wife he'd lost to cancer 5 years earlier, a revelation that explained both the shadow that sometimes crossed his face and his profound understanding of grief and rebuilding. In turn, Ellie shared more than she'd ever revealed to anyone about her own journey: her parents' disappointment when she became pregnant, her ex's abandonment, the years of struggling to create stability for Lily while deferring her own dreams. "I used to think happiness was a luxury I couldn't afford," she admitted, twirling pasta around her fork. "That I had to choose between Lily's needs and anything I might want for myself." Daniel's hand covered hers on the table. "And now?" She met his gaze. "Now I'm starting to think maybe it doesn't have to be either or." The evening ended with a kiss, real this time, gentle but filled with promise, at her door, and a plan to take Lily and Lucky to the park that weekend. As weeks turned to months, Daniel became a fixture in their lives. He helped Lily with her science project, teaching her about animal anatomy with a patience that left Ellie in awe. He fixed the leaky faucet in their bathroom that had been driving Ellie crazy for months. He brought Lucky to the clinic for his final checkup and returned with adoption papers officially listing Ellie Morgan as his owner. Most importantly, he showed up, consistently, reliably, becoming someone they could count on in a world that had taught both Ellie and Lily the danger of expectations. "I like Dr. Dan," Lily confided one night as Ellie tucked her in. "He doesn't talk to me like I'm a baby, and he makes you smile the real smile." "The real smile?" Lily nodded solemnly. "The one that goes all the way to your eyes. You didn't do that very much before." Out of the mouths of babes, Ellie kissed her daughter's forehead, overwhelmed by the simple truth of the observation. 6 months after that rainy morning at the bus stop, Daniel invited them to his house for the first time, a cozy craftsman with a fenced backyard where Lucky could run without a leash. As Lily explored the garden with the enthusiasm of a child discovering a magical kingdom, Daniel took Ellie's hand and led her to a small studio at the back of the property. "I wanted to show you this," he said, a hint of nervousness in his voice as he opened the door. Inside was a simple, sun-filled space with bookshelves, a comfortable reading chair, and a desk positioned to overlook the garden. "I was thinking," he said carefully, "that it might make a good study space. If someone wanted to finish their education degree, for instance." Ellie stared at him, her heart expanding painfully in her chest. "Daniel, I'm not trying to pressure you," he said quickly. "I just want you to know that I believe in your dreams as much as you believe in Lily's. Whatever you decide to do, I want to support it." Tears filled her eyes. "Why me?" she whispered. "Out of all the women you could have chosen, why a struggling single mom with more baggage than a carousel at the airport?" Daniel smiled, reaching out to brush away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. Because when I saw you standing in my clinic that day, soaking wet, having missed your bus and risked your job to save a stray dog, I recognized something I thought I might never find again." He took her hand, placing it over his heart. "Someone who loves with their whole being. Someone who does the right thing even when it costs them. Someone whose heart is so big it can turn a broken little dog and a lonely veterinarian into family." Family. The word resonated in the quiet space between them. "I love you, Ellie Morgan," he said simply. "You, Lily, Lucky, the family I never knew I was waiting for until you walked through my door." "I love you too," she replied, the words feeling both monumental and inevitable, like the final piece of a puzzle clicking into place. When he kissed her this time, it felt like coming home. 1 year to the day after Ellie missed her bus to help an injured dog, she stood in the same spot, waiting not for public transportation, but for her daughter to finish tying her shoes on the bench. Lucky, fully recovered and sporting a jaunty bandana, sat obediently at her feet. "Ready?" Daniel asked, appearing beside her with a thermos of coffee and that smile that still made her heart skip. "Ready," she confirmed, taking his hand. As they walked together toward the park where they were meeting friends to celebrate Lucky's adoption anniversary, Ellie reflected on the extraordinary chain of events that had led them here. A missed bus, a wounded dog, a kind veterinarian, a second chance at love and dreams she'd thought were forever out of reach. She was halfway through her education degree now, studying in the little studio that had become her sanctuary. Lily was thriving, blossoming in the warmth of having not just one but 2 adults who adored her. Lucky had appointed himself the family's protector and joy-bringer, his earlier trauma now just a shadow behind the brightness of his daily existence. And Daniel had shown her that love wasn't about grand gestures or fairy tale endings, but about showing up day after day, about making space for each other's wounds and dreams alike, about building something stronger together than any of them could have created alone. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked, squeezing her hand. Ellie smiled up at him, at this man who had seen value in her when she'd forgotten how to see it in herself. "I was just thinking about fate." "Fate?" "Mm-hmm. How sometimes the worst moment of your day, missing your bus, being late for work, can turn out to be the best moment of your life." Daniel stopped walking, turning to face her fully. The morning sunlight caught in his eyes, illuminating the flecks of gold that she now knew by heart. "You know what I think?" he said, his voice low and intimate despite the public setting. "I think it wasn't fate. I think it was you, making a choice that most people wouldn't make. Choosing kindness when it cost you something. That's not fate, that's character." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box, and Ellie's breath caught in her throat. "And that's why I'm standing here today, asking if you'll make another choice." He opened the box to reveal a simple but beautiful ring, its small diamond catching the light. "Ellie Morgan, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life loving you and Lily and building the family that began the day you missed your bus?" Through tears of joy, Ellie could see Lily and Lucky watching them, her daughter's face alight with excitement that suggested this moment might not be the complete surprise for her that it was for Ellie. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes." As Daniel slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into an embrace, as Lily ran to join them in a family hug with Lucky dancing circles around their feet, Ellie knew with absolute certainty that some detours, even those that begin with missed buses and injured strays, lead exactly where you're meant to be all along.